The Occupy protests are a major international movement now. You can tell that just from their size. There were 500,000 of them gathered in Madrid, 100,000 of them gathered in New York, and 50,000 of them gathered in Rome. Although that last one may just have been a Berlusconi bunga bunga party that got a bit out of hand. But you know, actually I should be kind about Berlusconi because he does actually support the protesters. In fact, most politicians support them. Berlusconi's gone one step further. He's actually joined them. He's currently occupying a brothel. In fact, one of the very few politicians that doesn't support them is Tony Blair. If Blair not liking something doesn't make it good, then you know what does? The protests are going on across all over the world. Okay. It's going on in 2,906 towns and cities all over the world. Far from the only politician that supports them though. The Indian Prime Minister supports them, the Brazilian one, Obama, Ed Miliband, they all support them. In fact, nearly every single politician does. There's even a protest going on in Iceland, which seems a bit pointless because you can't really have a 99% unless you have at least a population of 100. And yet, some people seem to oppose the protests, and honestly, why? Okay, a few local residents have got, you know, a bit het up about the mess the protesters have made, which actually is a bit silly, really. I mean, yes, there is a rat infestation in Washington DC because of the protest, but complaining about rats in Washington is wrong for two reasons. One, don't call them rats, you elected them. And two, you're missing the central point of the whole protest. If you're focusing on the sanitary damage they've done and the mess they made, you're really missing out the central point. And what you're not focusing on is the message they're trying to send, and that's the really important part. Because, I mean, if you're complaining about the mess they've made, you've missed the central premise. If you tell someone their son has been kidnapped by a paedophile in a black van, their first reaction isn't, it's a terrible shame, those black cat vans, you know, they don't half pollute. I mean, it's not that I've got anything against their beliefs, you know, their wish and their rights to molest children, but couldn't they carpool? Or use bikes or something? Some people seem to oppose them as the low level. If you're worried about someone stealing a £5 cap, you should be more worried about the fact that the banks have stolen millions and billions of our pounds. Part of the problem seems to be that the general public don't seem to understand the motives of the people there. And it's misleading stories in the newspapers that seem to have got them a misconception of what the protests are really about. It's misleading stories that have led the protesters from nearly being beaten up by the EDL. For those of you who don't know, the EDL is the English Defence League, or cunts. I mean, they don't really understand why the protesters are there, but they heard one or two of them might be, you know, slightly commie, which, by the way, 1% of the 99%ers are, a tiny amount of them. But they heard some of them might be Russian commie bastards, so they put down their copy of The Sun or Mein Kampf, and they went over there to try and hit people, because that's what they do, the EDL. But if someone actually explained the reason the protesters are there, the EDL I'm sure will be in favour. I mean, SS tattoos aren't free, you know. Don't ask me how I know that. It does seem odd that they're against them, because usually, you know, neo-Nazis are quite keen on the idea of people being grouped together in camps. But in fairness to the EDL, they do at least have the balls to offer their opinion publicly. I've actually got on the phone one of the chief spokesmen for the EDL, Mr. Raymond Sist, though he prefers to be called Ray. So I'm going to talk to him now. Am I right in understanding you're racist? He hung up on me. I don't know. But it isn't just the British extreme right wing that is actually against the protesters. It's also the American extreme right wing, by which I mean the Republicans. Yes, Herman Cain, extreme nut job, has actually come out and don't blame bankers, don't blame Wall Street. If you're not rich, if you don't have a job and you're not rich, blame yourself. Yeah, blame yourself, people. Blame yourself for losing your job at the car factory because you're not as efficient as a machine. Blame yourself that you can't lift a ton of steel like that machine that took your job at the car factory. Yeah, blame yourself for that. Blame yourself for all those lunch breaks you took while the machines were still operating. Blame yourself. Blame yourself for the actions of a few investment bankers that took your company's money, invested it, lost it, forcing your company to declare bankruptcy and you to lose your job. Blame yourself for that. Basically, Herman Cain is saying it's not the fault of the 1%, it's the fault of the 99%. Well, there's a politician that knows how to win votes. Behind the statement, I met this really nice girl in Portugal. She's called Madeline. Thankfully though, most of us do support the Occupy protests, and rightly so, because it's the right thing to do. Reforms do need to be made into the banking sector, and the sooner we do it, the better chance we have of fixing the economy. And who knows, one day the government might even make policies that do benefit the 99% rather than a couple of investment bankers. And who knows, one day the government might even make policies that do benefit the 99% rather than a couple of investment bankers.